Hey, um, I've done this before. I'm going to start a new hobby project and I wanted to show you guys what it is that I'm going to build. So here we go. So my new hobby project is going to be the AAPC, the African Auxiliary Pioneer Corps. Um, and let me start you with the start. So the project started with someone giving me a slight nudge. I have noticed that over the last couple of years in competitive play, I've seen these guys used a couple of times. I think the first time I played against someone using them was Stefan of the Swiss national team at World Open War, and he had brought a unit of these guys. They were just his backline holders, and I think perhaps he had like a couple of them had rifles, and the rest had no weapons, and he didn't really have any models for them. He had 3D printed some civilians who were carrying boxes. That was it. And last week, a friend of mine sent a list for a potential tournament to me. And it was a British list, and he had a huge unit of these, like a full strength unit. And he had given them all anti tank grenades. Why? I don't know. Maybe he thinks that they of them as a reusable Panzerfaust. Basically, he can charge tanks. Or you can go down on an objective, because you can take 10 men of these. They're inexperienced. You for 10 inexperienced dudes, you pay 40 points, because they haven't got any weapons, so they're 4 points each, which is very very cheap. But they can't do anything. You can arm up to half of them with rifles for 3 points, which I think like a couple of rifles in there might be a good idea. But that got me started, and I was like, I haven't got anything in my collection for this. I really need to do a hobby project on this. And then I started searching, because what if even is the Auxiliary Military Pioneer Corps sections? And I found these images. And I read their Wikipedia page. So the Auxiliary Military Pioneer Corps, which was the first unit I researched here, they were a group of reservists that got called in to fight when the Second World War started. They were part of the British Expeditionary Forces in Europe, and they were mainly there to like dig fortifications. Basically, I think perhaps the Brits had anticipated that the war in France would like be a repeat of the First World War, so they were like trenches is a thing. So they had a core of these guys, but even the modern battlefields of World War II really had a lot of demands for guys who could work and had machinery and all that stuff. So they were sent to France and actually ended up in combat when the British Expeditionary Forces were evacuated. Then they were one of the last units to be evacuated as well. So and these are a couple of photos of the guys in the AMPC. Now, the next thing I did was, well, I have to fit this in with my Brits. My Brits are 8th Army. They're all in Africa, so I painted them up in desert colors, and so I was like, that doesn't really fit, does it? Not massively so, because I mean, look at these guys over here. He's wearing his jumper, and they're all in their shirt sleeves because they're working, but they have long trousers and not the shorts of the Desert Army. So I started looking into, well, who did their job but in Africa, and what I came up with was the second wave of inspiration was the AAPC, the African Auxiliary Pioneer Corps. Now, these guys were mostly the Eighth Army had first. They had some from the Middle East, like groups of local levies that were basically more or less pressured into to working for the Brits. However, they got pretty much annihilated pretty early on in the war, in the conflict, and the Brits started recruiting more. So they did so from their empire in Africa. mostly from Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. So the tribal lands in South Africa were heavily canvassed to find recruits for this pioneer corps. At some point, some were even like pressured slash tricked into going. And I think in all, like there were like 36,000 or something like that. It was a not a massive army, but there was a lot of dudes. And they were sent from Durban via rail all the way up to Egypt, where they served mostly in logistical roles. Basically, they would wash down tanks. Here we see some of the African Auxiliary Corps washing out a Lee, Grant Lee tank. And these guys, and as soon as I like read a bit about these guys' history, I was like, wow, this could be something, because I really enjoy painting very niche armies, and I once had a project where I wanted to like make an Ethiopian army, but since it doesn't have rules for bold action, it's sort of a little bit died out for me. But this might be an opportunity to repeat, and it would add to my British collection. So I was immediately hooked. I wanted to do this, and these guys didn't fight a lot, right? They were there for the campaign in North Africa. They also helped with the invasion of Sicily, and they had some supporting combat roles. Mostly they weren't even issued with rifles. They were many of them were just asked to bring their own spears, basically, or given spears. So these are assegai spears, like the Zulu spears. They were also giving the clubs that the Zulus had, just to have a weapon, because rifles were not issued to all of them. Very, very few rifles were issued, and not a lot of ammunition, because mostly they were backline holders. They were a mobile workforce, right? And I think also perhaps that the white overlords were a little bit afraid of arming and training the native population of Africa. So that was a thing as well. But look at these guys on parade here, and their slouch hats. They have a typical British uniform on, with the rolled up sleeves. They even had shorts on, or long trousers as well. Both were issued to the African Pioneer Corps. So for me, this was like perfect. The only thing I needed to find was more images, and there aren't a lot, I have to say, online. Couldn't find a lot. I found this one though, of native support troops. I think these are from East Africa somewhere. And they look flashy, don't they? With feathers on their hats, and a variation of hats as well, and a huge variation of gear. I think these were native guides in East Africa. So not like directly attached, but it still gives us an image of how native troops in Africa who were deployed in secondary roles, how little gear that they were given, and how much of it was just whatever they wore. And these guys are pretty well equipped, because they've got ammunition and rifles. Though maybe the rifles are not the standard rifles issued to the British Army anyway. And this one was really my main inspiration. This is, I think, what I want to build. So look at the guy in the front carrying this huge load. That could be one of my unarmed dudes. And then if I wanted a few riflemen, you can see a couple of guys carrying rifles there as well. But most of them are just packed down with heavy equipment that they're carrying. I was like, yeah, this will be my unarmed guys. This will be my auxiliary Pioneer Corps. So that is what I want to build. Now, I have to start, I think, with what I do have. I have a couple of bodies left over from my work with my my Perry Miniatures Desert Rats. So I have a couple of bodies of that, and I think I'm going to have to use that as the base for my troops. They would have the right gear, right? So they would have the right uniforms. And they would have shorts. Although if we go back and look at the images from before, you do see some of them wearing long trousers. I guess for the African troops, they felt like shorts wasn't really appropriate because it got really cold in the night and stuff. And from what I've seen, like people in Africa tend to, I think, feel the warmth in a different way than Europeans do. So I don't think a lot of them may have requested to get issued with shorts, maybe. But I don't know. I think perhaps for ease, I think I'll just stick with the bodies of these guys. But the faces are very European, so I think I'm going to have something else as well. Then I looked through my collection and I found that I had a box of Perry Miniatures Mahadist from the Sudan. Now, these, like, period-wise, are not really it. They're from the 1880s, I believe. And they aren't really African enough in the faces for what I really wanted to do. But, oh, well, some of the bodies, for if I don't want to issue all my guys with British uniforms, well, some of the bodies might actually work from the images we saw previously, right? As native, like whatever they wore. I still am not completely satisfied with the heads for these guys, and I have spent quite a lot of them already building up my native irregulars for my British Army. So a lot of them have already been used. So I have a couple of bodies left, but I don't have that much. So they might be useful. Then I also have a box of Wargames Atlantic's Afghans. Now they're completely not useful face-wise. I did use a lot of them, their heads, to make a unit of Indians for my British Army. So like Sikhs with turbans. They work perfectly for that. But the heads aren't African in the faces, right? They're Afghanis. So as such, I think perhaps the bodies again might provide some assistance for like native garb, African clothing, but the weapons and the heads not so much. And the final thing I'm looking at, and this is not something I actually have in my collection, but I have a friend who is doing a Zulu War project. Now these, though, would be perfect. The heads would be perfect. They have the same system as the other Perry Miniatures. So they have like a small bulb at the base of the head for the neck that goes into the torso. That's exactly the same that you have with all the others. So that would be perfect, I think, to kit bash into my collection. And they would also fit because the Perry Miniatures are a little bit smaller than Warlord Games sizes. So I think that they would also be perfect for the African faces. Now, I don't want the Zulu headgear of late 18th century Zulu armies, right? But I might want some of the heads that don't have this. Maybe even some of the heads that have this like circle around. I don't know what that's called. Maybe some of my viewers in South Africa can tell me that. But you'll see this, the heads over here. Some of them have this circlet around the head. That might be a thing because these guys would get into uniform. They would be issued with a lot of gear, and they would have to take the train to Egypt, and they would like bring whatever they could. So maybe some of them would bring like little bits and pieces that would remind them of home, maybe a headgear. Or I could just use the heads here that doesn't have anything. So I have a friend who's doing that project, and he might have a few of these left over. So I'm getting those from him, I hope. I also looked and said, well, the assegai, the short spears, the stabbing or thrusting, cutting spears of the Zulus here, well, I know that some of them were issued with Assegai. So I was thinking like maybe I could like if he doesn't use all his spears and clubs, and I can't remember that name. It has an Afrikaner name for the Zulu clubs here, but like a couple of them and a couple of spears, that might be good because these guys, as per the fact, can fight in close combat, but so like spears and clubs, yeah, I think that could be really cool and would give them a sort of African look and feel as well. So that is what I'm thinking right now. Now the slouch hats is a bit of a problem. So what I'm lacking here is I'm lacking the slouch hats. I may have to get those 3D printed. Martin, who recently features on this channel, has a whole Australian army. I'm inquiring him where he got his hats. Maybe he has some left over, like a couple of Australian heads that I could cut and refit, like kit bash a bit. But I do lack some slouch hats because they were a thing, I think. I also am going to have to work on things for them to carry, and one of the things that I'm looking at is this bit of kit here. This is a Victrix British Napoleonic gun crew. Now they have all kinds of wonderful arms with all kinds of different stuff where they're carrying stuff, buckets and stuff. The only thing is they've got long sleeves, which I can work with that, and then they've got these rolled up what are they called? Reverse in Danish. I can't remember the English word right now. Which I'm going to have to remove because they are very Napoleonic and not very World War II. So, but like a couple of buckets, that might be a thing, or someone digging a hole with one of these implements. There's like a lot of things I think I could do with this. So this might be where I get some of the arms for my project here. But I also think I need a lot of backpacks, like heavy backpacks. You saw that guy carrying like a huge sack of stuff. I'm going to need some of that as well, which I may have to do in. I may have to model that using green stuff. So backpacks. I do have quite a lot of different backpacks from different plastic kits. Americans are really good at this, like getting yourself a bunch of American stuff. But I also I have some German stuff as well. So all of that might be useful, cutting it up and then reattaching it to these models. Yeah. That is my project. So I'll get back to you on how it goes, and hopefully the African Auxiliary Pioneer Corps will see battle at some point. That's it. See you in the next video. Cheers.